All right. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of Palantir Weekly. We are here, episode number 108 in the world of Palantir. I am joined with me. We got Matt Money. We got Arnie. We got Vince. And we have a special appearance by Mr. Steven Fiorillo, who's going to be with us today, breaking down everything in the world of Palantir. This has been one of the craziest weeks ever in the world of Palantir, and I think for the first 5-10 minutes, we should just give a raw reaction. Stock is up 45%. We added, $25 billion in market capitalization, touched $25 after lingering between 16 and 18 for literally 7 to 8 months. And here we are. Vince, let's start off with you, since you look the most excited for Palantir.
Yeah, I mean, my stock this week has almost hit 200%. It's like a few cents away from hitting 200%, and it feels amazing. I think it happened a little bit too quickly. I did end up selling covered calls, 8 days expiry, $30 strike price. Technically, it felt like free money, couldn't say no. But I'm not selling. And I think that it's when you look at the volume, it has not been retail buying. I was very surprised that we didn't have a pullback after the 30% up day. And then I was really surprised we didn't have a pullback after the 10% up day. And I think it's mostly institutions buying, and they're not buying to swing trade the stock. They're buying because AI is a secular trend, and they're going to sit in this stock for quite some time. So I think we're going to hold. Maybe not 25, but we're not going back down to 16.
You're muted.
All right, I was muted. I was saying, Matt, your raw thoughts on 45% in 4 days.
I was saying, it was going to be like a mid spitting right here. I'm honestly very surprised and excited. I think I wasn't expecting such a pop. I think the more we continue to establish this profitability of the organization and continue to demonstrate the potential that this thing might have from a long-term growth perspective and the resiliency of the organization, I think you're starting to see more and more pop-ups after earnings. And so I'm just delighted to kind of see that kind of continue. I do think that the valuation is a little bit overrun here, but I think we're always going to struggle with something like this, where we have a phenomenal product, undeniable product that I think a lot of people envy over, and I think it's also a revolutionary product. You'll probably see more about this, in the coming weeks from me, but I honestly think, and I have thought this for several years, that these products are very reminiscent of what Microsoft released in 1985 with Windows. And I think it's a revolution. It might not be like for like, but it's the new operating system that I think most people will eventually, that work in a very data-driven world, will live in. And I don't think that people fully understand it as of yet, because they haven't gotten to a place where data is overrunning them. But if anybody has been in a place where data is overrunning them, it makes complete sense to organize your data this way. It makes complete sense to utilize Palantir's Foundry or Gotham as an operating system and to build programs on top of those operating systems. And I think this is something that has impacted my company and me very immensely, which is why I became a shareholder in the first place, because I would love to see the people that I've worked with, and I want to be a stakeholder and shareholder in their success. And I think that this is a pivotal moment, and you'll hear from me about this and many more times in the coming weeks.
Let's do Steve. Give me a good minute on your raw thoughts, and we'll do Arnie, and then we'll go deeper into what happened on earnings. What were your thoughts, Steve?
I mean, this is the true inflection point if we ever had one. I mean, I don't know what else you can say about this. Pretty much the bear thesis is dismantled. It's pretty hard to make a bear case. And yes, while there are risks to any business, and there are certainly risks to investing in Palantir, every bear thesis that individuals have come up with, this quarter was the inflection point that obliterated the bear thesis. Now it's about continued execution.
Arnie, your raw thoughts. You were 100% in. Now you're just 80% in, but stock ran up almost 50% on the week. How'd you feel?
This is happening finally after 3 years of what I thought it could be, the potential, the emergence of how I expected Palantir to become. Now I see that company. And we had essentially the confirmation of the entire thesis that, hey, the product is good. They really need to find a way to deliver this product into the customer's hands. And they finally did it. So it's not only, they are accelerating, but they're definitely disrupting everything they do. As you mentioned, paradoxically, they innovated in sales because with the traditional methods, they were not really delivering. So I experienced my first 3 bagger with a considerable amount. So I'm extremely happy for that, even if it drops a little bit later, but we got it.
All right. Everyone in the chat, you guys can put in your comments on your sort of raw thoughts on how you felt about Palantir. I think let's get deeper into the earnings because the earnings have a lot of numbers to recap. We've probably talked about all of the numbers. All of us have given our thoughts on Twitter and YouTube over the past really 48 hours. But I mean, we obviously got to get deeper into them. So I think we'll go around the room and we'll ask everyone what's one metric you want to talk about. So maybe think about it for 10, 15 seconds, just one metric. Then you can talk about more metrics. But if you have to pick one metric, and then if someone goes before you, just don't repeat their metric, pick a different one. What is the metric you would talk about? Anyone want to go first?
I'll go first if you want.
Okay. Go ahead.
Free cash flow.
Okay.
Like there's a lot of metrics, but bottom line profitability, free cash flow is just continuing to grow. You had around a 49% free cash flow margin in Q4. You've had Palantir have over a 30% free cash flow margin 2 times prior. I mean, it's 48.71%. They did 296 million in free cash flow this quarter. Free cash flow is just under what they report as adjusted because they put back in cash paid for employer payroll taxes related to stock-based compensation. And when they're saying that they're going to generate 800 million to $1 billion in 2024, and all their growth is still piling in, this is a company that can continue to grow this free cash flow for years on end and truly have what should be an arc that could resemble a Salesforce or an Intuit or a Workday or an SAP. And when you look at where those companies are and what they trade at, it's really exciting for the next decade for Palantir.
Vince, metric that you think was one of the best metrics from earnings?
There was a lot of good metrics, and I think we're going to pick the good ones also. Steve picked a cash flow. I'm going to pick the customer growth because that's a signal. I was actually wondering if they maybe can implement AIP bootcamps also internationally to pick up because they focus mostly on the US. I think the same concept should work also internationally, but it makes sense that they piloted it in the US. And this is a sign that, yes, they had a very good quarter, but there's no stopping of this in sight. And I think that there is a potential that they're just going to keep beating the next quarters to come on the numbers and keep increasing the growth, because as long as the customer numbers are increasing, we know that they start small with customers and then they extend and scale up at the customers. So that's a sign of a lot of new revenue to come.
Okay, Matt, if you had to pick a metric.
Yeah, so mine's similar to Vince's because we can't choose the same. But, I think one of the things that we've all, and I will get to it in a second, so I'm not skipping your question. One of the things that we've always talked about, Dom, myself, I want to see how the hell they split this into acquire, scale, and expand, right? And I think that this is something that we all continue. I had a buddy of mine, and maybe I'm just dense and I didn't get to it, but he basically said, Matt, I think that you could probably take an opportunity to look at what are the $1 million deals that were added over the year, and which is my metric that I'm choosing, and try to relate that back to customer growth. And then I think you'll be able to understand, at least for the last 12 months, how many people they've put within the acquire stage. And so just taking a quick opportunity to do that, if you look at the amount of $1 million deals that they've done over the past year, they've done about 136, 45 of which were in the fourth quarter, 39 in the third quarter, 34 in the first quarter, and then only 18 in the second quarter. But overall, year over year, customer growth was 130. So if you think about it in terms of that, it's like if you utilize the $1 million deals, that's a small entry point. And I assume that that's probably what they're using as the entry point to gather new customers and have them scale beyond that. Now, of course, you have the $5-10 million deals. Those are the things where they're renewing with the Army, the NHS, things like that that are already kind of in the scale or maybe even the expand phase. So to me, the $1 million deals is something I'm kind of keeping an eye on, and 136 new customers, you could build on that year over year and grow into $5-10 million deals. You see all the time with the customers that we've gotten. They do 5-year deals for $80 million. They do 5-year deals, 6-year deals for $400 million. So being able to get these people in the door in the acquire phase is really just the first piece. And if you're able to retain, let's say 80-90% of them and grow their revenue, let's just say from that particular deal by 20, 30, 40% for the next several years, it ends up being something that ends up being a pretty good chunk of change throughout that time period.
Arnie, your favorite metric?
We all know that the customer count is important. The revenue growth is important. Everything is important. My favorite metric of these earnings were the number of deals. Not only because compared with last year, essentially the deals over 1 million doubled. So from 55 to 103. But because the big deals, so essentially the deals above 10 million, went from 5 to 21. This has a profound implication in the growth we should expect going forward. So it's like Palantir is getting more deals, both on the small side with bootcamps. You make 5 days, you're already ready to sign a contract, but also as confirmed in the earnings call, in a matter of relatively very little time, the management said we were able to close like $20 million deal. This accelerated dramatically not only the number of customers, but how fast the customers become profitable for Palantir, creating a very positive feedback loop, because the sooner you monetize at scale with a customer, the more cash you generate sooner, and you can use that cash then to market yourself better, to get further clients. So it is really insane to me to think that last year we were dealing with a company with a completely different risk profile and prospective growth. Like, we knew that the potential was there, but now with the deals that we're signing, and I will say we are not already at full potential, things are dramatically changing and accelerating. And my perspective right now is that we are kind of biased, anchored to what we have been seen in the past. We knew that there was a strong period in 2020, 2021, and for notice, they didn't disclose the deals of the Q4 2021, but in 2021 Q3, there was already another very strong quarter with 18 deals over 10 million. So very similar to what we got. And we know that 2021 was a period where there was no SaaS recession. So everyone was really stimulated to invest a lot in tech. So I see really like the hints that that 30% or even more growth is not only attainable, but we are getting closer to that.
I agree with everybody's metric. To me, adjusted operating margins were amazing. It went from 17% 18 months ago to 34%. It was 29% last quarter, up 34%. That was exciting. Guidance was about 20% growth on the high end, which is really good. Not amazing, 24, 25, 26%. But if we believe they're sandbagging, which if these boot camps are scaling, they did 560 last quarter. So you would imagine that scales even 10, 20%. We're going to get a lot more boot camps, a lot more customers, and potentially a lot more revenue growth as well. Let's talk about the stock. Obviously, this is something that has just been absolutely insane this week. I don't think in our wildest dreams anyone here expected the stock to go from 16 to 24 because we have had a lot of PTSD with Palantir. 2185 was the top. We saw a lot of insiders direct selling, not even scheduled sales back in November at that 2185 top. And we couldn't really blame them because there was really no reason for it to run. There was no real catalyst. But we have been in this 21s before. In August, we saw around $20, 2023. This time we got to 2185, and it seems like there was a different momentum. There was a different level of FOMO. We had over 400 million shares traded the day after earnings. There was a different level of just volume of interest around Palantir. So I want to talk about the AI narrative associated with Palantir and why we think we got a 50% increase. And then also, do you think this is sustainable? And do you think it's going to come crashing right back down? And this was just a fun little week for Palantir. Let's start with Steve. What are your thoughts on actual stock action? You're muted.
Wow. Do you know what happens on February 21st, Matt?
NVIDIA earnings. Yeah.
That's right. The godfather of AI.
Correct.
I mean, the price action was interesting, but you had such a strong narrative. And it seems like, and when I said inflection point before, a lot of institutions really got it this quarter, and I am very interested to see what happens if NVIDIA blows earnings out of the water. Is there going to be another resurgence in AI? And is the whole sector, everybody that's involved in AI, are they going to ride the wave up from AMD to Microsoft to Palantir? I mean, it's we don't know what's going to happen, but I think with all the enthusiasm and the amount of bullishness coming out and everything that Palantir reported, it feels like, and obviously we don't know this, nobody can predict the future, but it feels like that 14 to 16 floor just increased to 19 to 21, so to speak. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens. I'm fully prepared for a sell-off. It's nice seeing shares this high. It'd be even nicer if they go higher. But look, if it sells off, I think a lot of us are in this for the long term. It's not going to matter to me too much, but it's going to be interesting to see what happens the 21st and 22nd.
Vince, your thoughts on stock action?
Yeah, I was very surprised that we hit over 20. This is why I'm wearing this. And, then that we went to 25. And as I do think that the valuation is a bit stretched at this point. But exactly as Steve mentioned, I remember a few months back when Don Rinaldi was sitting here, he was holding NVIDIA. At that time, it was 300 or 400. And Amit, you were asking him, why aren't you selling? And he said, this is not how long-term investing works. And you said, but do you think that the stock is expensive? And he said, yeah, I think it's expensive. And the next quarter, NVIDIA reported something that made 400 look very, very cheap, And today, I bet you there's a lot of people who are wishing they would have bought at 400, which just a few months ago was a crazy high price. And I think that Palantir, I don't know, as Steve said, nobody can predict the future. But Palantir might do something similar, that in the next earnings, they might report something that's going to make $25 look like, why didn't we get in at that point, For me, the worst case scenario, which I'm completely happy with, is that we stay in a range between 19, 20 to 25 until we grow into this valuation, but shouldn't be very long.
Matt, your thoughts on the stock going up 50% as you sing to work every morning? Can we show that video?
Yeah, feel free. I feel bad. I didn't do one today, so That's
Matt,
probably why the
before you
stock.
go, that could be the best part about earnings. Watching those videos of Matt every morning is hilarious.
I will say I didn't do one today, and the stock retraced a little bit. So maybe I apologize.
Boy, we
in
can't. It's gonna
advance.
demonetize the whole stream. YouTube's AI is gonna find that shit.
Yeah, you're probably right. Good point. But it's nice to get a little bit of conviction. But I would say what I think is happening with the stock here is it's re-rating, and I don't disagree with what Steve said with the re-rating of 19 to 20 kind of being your floor. And I think there's several key reasons for this. I think we are now realizing that instead of being like a 25 to 30% cash flow margin, now we're looking at anywhere, as they've put out for guidance this year, 31 to 36% cash flow margin. They're going to be looking at anywhere between 800 million to $1 billion in cash flow. That said, I think that opens up the opportunity to actually start experiencing some buybacks. You think about this in this perspective, when you get 800 to $1 billion, that alone will be enough to double the amount of money that it takes to kind of offset sort of your share-based compensation, which ended up at the year, just under 500 million or just over $500 million. So now you're getting to the place now where you're generating enough capital to offset that fully, and not necessarily have to go into, I guess, further dilution of the stock. So I think that you have that piece of it. I think that people are recognizing that, hey, we're going back to 20%. Is this the beginning? Do they think that we're going to eventually land up closer to 25%? I think they recognize that we've got 130 new customers through the door that could add substantial revenues in the future. So I think these are all positive catalysts that people are starting to sit here and scratch their head and say, hey, this thing is doing pretty good comparatively to some of these other companies that had these massive slowdowns post-pandemic as people were struggling to go back to the office and everything. These guys are kind of hitting the ground running with this AI trend. These guys should be involved with the love that we're giving out to some of these other companies. And here we are now kind of getting this re-rating on the stock because of that. Now, do I think we're going to see another leg up this year? I don't. I think that this is going to be something where we kind of form a base here, just like what Steven was saying. So I think we'll see a retracement down in the low 20s. But I think this just goes to show, this $25-ish range goes to show where I think we can end up, pretty solidly at the end of the year. Do I think we'll have a spike up, close to 30? It's possible after a good earnings, but do I think we're going to sustain a 30? I think we have to wait until a 2025 opportunity comes around where we kick growth back up into maybe the high 20s or maybe even the low 30s before we
do you think 24 is overvalued right here?
Yes and no, right? I think if you think about it in this perspective, if you look at it from a fiscal year 24 perspective, you're always going to say yes. But this is a forward-looking organization and you need to value it as such. And so when you think about next year, this company knows how to keep operating expenditures down. You're able to go from, say, 600 or so, 650 or so million in ops cash this year. Last year, you're expected to go to over 800 to close to $1 billion. This year, who's to say next year you're not going to get closer to 1.2 billion, maybe even more, if cash flow margin continues to increase to above 35% on its way to 40% towards the latter half of the year. I think if you think about it in that perspective, next year we're going to be earning close to, let's just do some math. Let's add 20% onto 2.6. You're going to be earning over $3 billion, probably closer to $3.2, $3.3 billion in fiscal year 25. Put a 30%, 35% cash flow margin on that. You're starting to look at something where you're going to start eating away at that price to cash flow margin, that price to free cash flow pretty quickly. And so I think this is a premier company, unique in its own right. And I think at the end of the day, if you look at it in 2024 metrics, it's going to be overvalued. If you look at it in fiscal year 26, which is generally how I value my companies 2 years ahead, I think it's not actually too crazily expensive. But I think with that, you're going to be sitting on the edge of every earnings call, making sure we hit those metrics. If you don't, that's where we start seeing the 5 to 10% slips after earnings. But if you continue to surprise to the upside, that cash flow margin continues to increase, that growth number goes from 20% to 22% to 23% to 25%, and you continue up this trajectory, then I think, it's justified here. But in terms of valuation on fiscal year 24, of course, it's expensive. I think that you'll end the year probably around this price. I hope I'm wrong, but I think there's going to be a lot of fluctuation and volatility between there. I think you're going to be circulating between $20 to $28 all year.
So you don't think we're coming below $20 again?
I mean, I think there's going to be spikes down, as always. Something crazy happens in the market, but I think sustained. I think we won't be below 19 for 6 months or something like that. I think if it happens, it'll be for a brief moment in time.
Arnie, your thoughts on price action this week?
The short answer is there is no turning back. And I'm not specifically talking about the stock price action, but in terms of perception. Can you share the screen, please, a little bit? Just to go back in time, a couple of months ago, in early December, we all saw this, the proliferation of people making the map of the AI value chain. Basically, okay, what are the key players in the market of AI? And for instance, you could see here the hardware, so easily AMD, NVIDIA, data infrastructure, AI application. And guess what? Palantir was not included. And this lady who shared this map is not like a random person on the web. Like, she is investing and sharing insights on B2B tech, 10 years as ex-Citadel. So this lady is actually specialized in B2B tech. And she didn't realize Palantir was essentially part of this AI group, to the point that she even said, but why Palantir? No. Well, Palantir is more a consultant than a technology provider. You can see it from the revenue growth and the margin profiles. I would say just a couple of months after, with this quarter, if you try to say something like that again, I think at this point you have enough evidence that this statement can be easily rejected. So what we are seeing right now is the perception that we always had now becomes the perception to which most market participants agree. I would say they need to agree if they don't want to be like Rishi, who's around here. So this creates a paradigm shift in the narrative, because officially now Palantir enters in this cluster of AI company, which casually is what everyone is seeking for. Palantir is expected to be like the only pure AI software company in the S&P 500, which creates further demand for this stuff. So if we look at it from the pure technical side of the stock, we see that the stock mooned, and there is the perception now, since we got traumatized that all these spikes got some rejection, that now it has run too much. But it is also true that for the first time, we see a boom associated by real strong fundamentals and a broad acceptation that Palantir is that outstanding company that we realized it was, but it wasn't fully emerged. And this creates a reset of the evaluation framework. What I mean with that is that while Palantir previously was, okay, just another company, then, it is a software company, then, it is a GAAP profitable company. Right now, we have the combo of everything you want to see, like a software company with AI, with the AI label, pristine financials. So it's like, and accelerating growth and accelerating story. So it's like all the potential checkbox an institutional investor wants to see, included the S&P 500, is like now everything is there. So this automatically transfers Palantir from being just an average software company. By the way, Palantir is still not included in too many industry SaaS indexes. So this to say that there is still space there. But apart from that, like Palantir went from being an average software company to be naturally associated with what are considered the top edge software companies, requiring the highest multiples. So the Snowflake, the CrowdStrike, the ServiceNow. So this creates a paradigm shift in the multiple. And even if we see the stock mooning so much, so little, the reality is that what we're seeing is a re-rate. So Palantir calibrating and reaching the status of the other big software guys that grow so much that Wall Street love. And we are now, just to share a little bit, like, could you give me a second to reshare and just to visualize this? Like previously, Palantir was here, stuck in hell, So you see, we went from a meme to this is a crap company to this is a gap profitable company. So we got a little bit of re-rating in the EV sales. And oh, this is AI. But now this is a AI growing story. And Palantir is now approaching at almost 19 EV sales, the 21 EV sales of Snowflake and CrowdStrike. So while previously the benchmarks were like Salesforce, average software company, then ServiceNow, very good software companies, probably the best software company in B2B in terms of numbers. Now we are getting into the top tier growing SaaS in terms of valuation and respective multiples. So I wouldn't be surprised right now if in terms of EV sales, we approach Snowflake or even succeed. What do you think?
Yeah, I think the Snowflake comparison is very interesting because is Palantir conventionally overvalued right now, just given like the amount of growth they put up in the earnings and then how fast the stock went? Yes. But when Snowflake breaks out today to 76 billion, it really makes you think, like, why shouldn't Palantir be somewhere close to that, which is more like 50 billion versus 35 billion? Either the entire market is ridiculously overvalued right now and we are in a bit of a bubble, and Nvidia getting 500 billion in 2 weeks or 5 weeks is insane. SMCI going up to $740 makes no sense. Big tech, Microsoft hitting new all-time highs. Like, either we're in that era and that's why Snowflake is getting this multiple and Palantir as well, and everyone will be punished. Or I agree with you, Arnie, if the market's going to give Snowflake that multiple and they're going to give Nvidia this multiple, then they're going to have to give Palantir that multiple, because before, as you pointed out in the charts, Palantir didn't have the actual fundamentals to support it. And every week we came on this show for the past 8 months, our core thing was like, all right, we got this awesome deal. This is great. This is awesome. But why isn't there the growth? Why isn't there the expanding free cash flow margins? Like, why isn't that stuff ready? Seems like now that's there. And just like with GAAP profitability, they're not going backwards. They may have 1 or 2 bad quarters, but they're not going to go backwards. And if the street is pulling that forward, and they also believe that this is an actual AI play, even if it's not, NVIDIA GPUs type of demand, then I don't know if this necessarily stops at 24. I mean, this has a lot of room to get caught up in the hype. The only thing I think that hurts Palantir is that if there's a broad market sell-off, which S&P at 500, you would imagine there could be somewhat of a breather. Palantir might take a break back at 1918 if that ends up happening. Steve, we've got your article here. I want to show a couple things from your article. Customer count. Do you want to give us a little bit of your perspective on where you see customer count going and how you thought they did last quarter, adding about 35% year over year in customers?
Yeah, I mean, look, this is, when I say that this is an inflection point, it's because everything came together and The bear case, I would love somebody to explain a legit bear case to me at this point. Bear case used to be black box, commercial's not going to grow, government's going to stall out. Well, government's grown. Commercial has grown tremendously. You gain 315 commercial clients since Q1 2021. Total customer count has grown tremendously. And from what we've learned about AI Pay, you have more and more companies lining up that can't even get into these demos. So to think that this is a black box, it's crazy. I don't want to hear it anymore. I don't want to say it anymore. Cisco Systems is not going to present at these conferences. Tyson's not going to present to these conferences if the product isn't good. You're not going to have the largest companies in the world using the product if it's not good and creating value. And it doesn't matter what I think. It doesn't matter what Wall Street analysts thinks. It doesn't matter what the Wall Street Journal thinks. These customers have the ability to utilize any software product they want to utilize. They're utilizing Palantir for a reason, and that's who we need to take seriously. And the deal book is probably one of the most important things. I mean, you had over 100 deals just in Q4 alone. You had 3 deals of over $25 million. If you pull that slide back up, I don't remember exactly how many 10 and 5 million deals there were, but it was something like 35 million deals plus and like 18 or so for 10 million. I mean, it's tremendous growth across the board. And when you think about AIP monetization and upselling, there's a lot that can occur.
Arnie, your thoughts on customer count expanding? Do you agree with Steve that is inflection point as we go forward?
Yes, and we have been just seeing the sign. So the deals is probably the leading indicator of what comes next, because it is the general the general number that tells us both existing customers expanding and new customers. So let's put it this way. If we just see the deals exploding, that sooner or later will become revenue. We don't really know how, but how fast, but we know that there is a substance there. So unless they are fake deals or very small deals, but we have been seeing that this is not the case. So, and as we know, it's deals drive customers drive revenue. So if you have engine of the deals working very well, there is this flywheel that more deals generate more customers create better network effects, because Palantir could be spread with also the suppliers, and the suppliers of the suppliers, the competitors, seeing that the other company using Palantir starts having an advantage, like Tyson Food, like Airbus versus Boeing. They start feeling I can't be left behind if my competitors are actually investing so much into something, and something that works. So then you have social pressure in terms of enterprise CEOs, combined with the product that naturally tends to expands the brand. So that's why I say there is no turning back, because this is one of the situations where I think the hype can become a reality. What I mean with that is 2 years ago, when Palantir was a meme, I remember there was a period where every other day there was a press release of a new deal. And I was, wow. So now the growth will be to the moon. But there was a but. Palantir, even if they were making good deals, they didn't have the engine to really transform the hype that was around Palantir, even if it was not the most positive kind of hype, but it was in a position where it was very popular. Everyone was talking about them, maybe not in the best way, but they had the golden opportunity to actually make their voice very loud, okay? But Palantir didn't have the infrastructure to actually scale its software because still, if I wanted to acquire a new customer, they had to implement a 6-month pilot and pray. Right now, the hype could become reality because they have the tools with bootcamps to actually capture all that interest that is around, and they can feed that feedback loop of Palantir is now known. It is known as a good company. There are more use cases. So compared with 2-3 years ago, now the customers are like 4x, 3x, something like that. So the potential amplifying effect coming from these customers is just multiplied, combined with Palantir that can acquire a customer in a couple of days, not 6 months. So now all the visibility that Palantir is having, both for the stock, both for the business perspective, both for the active contribution in Ukraine, and I think you want to talk about that later, but we have been seeing a lot of amplifying effect on the brand recognition of Palantir to the point that even Jason Violin podcast guy shared Carp remark on the earnings call. So Palantir is getting that level of attention. So now I think they can really capitalize on this attention to make the business all grow. So it's not only a peak in attention in terms of media, stock. I think that now can become real money for the company.
Yeah, and speaking of attention, let's go to this topic. This was really exciting. Time magazine has made Palantir the cover of their magazine, which is pretty amazing. The first AI war, Palantir and other tech giants, and the future of a battle in Ukraine. Steve, what were your thoughts on this Time magazine? Then we'll get to Vince.
I just want to get a copy and send it to PSA and get a PSA 10 grade on it and hang it up.
Okay. It's very exciting. Steve.
Alternative asset, we see.
Alternative asset. One day will be worth something. You know what, Amit? We should all get these and we should all buy one share of there's a company, Give a Share, I think. I bought a share of Coca-Cola for my wife, like a physical share. So funny. I bought one share. It's kind of a joke for her because it's her favorite drink. They send her a dividend check every quarter for like 50 cents or whatever it is. It's hilarious.
That's so funny.
In the mail? That's great.
Yeah, it's great.
Sorry, what they send?
A dividend.
So there's a site, I think it's called Give a Share.
Yeah, you can buy like
physical shares of stock. Yeah, it's giveashare.com. So I bought Coca-Cola and they pay a dividend. I have a physical stock certificate of it, and they send the dividend check every quarter to our house. It's hilarious.
Dude, I want to convert my Palantir shares, all of them, into physical stock certificates and just like stare at them every day in like a box. That'd be pretty cool.
It is so expensive because most brokerage houses won't do it anymore. So you got it. Like you're paying way over market price for it to do it through this company.
So funny.
It's actually,
But you get one
they'll
from
frame it like it's pretty cool.
All right, Vince, your thoughts on this magazine?
Yeah, similar to Steve, it's a major achievement for the company, and this is just a sign that we are becoming more and more well-known and mainstream. And you know, part of it was Jason Calacanis is posting this American exceptionalism by Carp. So funny how 2 years ago we were talking about, not me, but some people were talking about, you know, replacing Carp and we need a new CEO. And, you know, now he's like the rockstar CEO, and people are like, people need to look at how to, you know, conduct earnings calls. Look at Carp. He's the best. Yeah.
I remember us having
Guys,
what? What'd you find?
I'm sorry, Vince. I made sure.
No problem. No problem.
Just share it. I'm doing it. I'll be doing this at some point. You will see this hanging behind me. I
You're gonna pay
don't care how
$71.
overpriced it is.
$70.
Doesn't matter. Doesn't matter.
What's the market cap? That's 150 billion market cap you're paying for.
No, but this is what they charge to actually do everything. Like there's fees and everything involved. It's very expensive.
This actually looks really cool, dude. I might do one and do it like a gift.
I mean, how you gotta do this and get it behind you? You have a freaking whole YouTube channel built on Palantir.
Yeah, I feel like I got to do this, dude. This is so cool.
But is it
This
like
awesome?
But is it like money? So let's say that if somebody
Yeah,
comes in your
100%. This
So
represents
like-
one share of Palantir.
so if like somebody comes to your house, steals that thing, then you lost a share of Palantir.
Yes.
Wow.
How do the brokerages keep track of these like physical shares that are in the world?
You gotta go through the site. It's too much to go through. I'll put the link. I'll send it in the private, and you can just put it in here, and people can look at it. And it's pretty interesting.
Okay, Matt, what were your thoughts on Time Magazine and the increased media coverage but for Palantir?
I think it's in line with the company's goals. I mean, we've been talking about it now for over 2 years. I think that the company is mostly focused on ensuring that the West succeeds. And so any ally, Ukraine, Taiwan, Israel, will always have backing from the US, and will always have backing from Palantir, because we're just ensuring that happens. I mean, I'm sure if anything happened in the EU or the UK or anything like that, it'll be the same, right? As long as the United States wants to ensure that the country will still be there, over time. It'll always get the backing of the U.S. and Palantir being its client. In terms of what I think Palantir is doing a lot of advanced things. It's a great place to test the theatrical warfare in real time, and they think it's really the first time where they've been able to battle test these things. A lot of these products have been used for fighting against terrorism, which might be more strategic, but this is actually kinetics and dynamic and changing from day to day, and being able to utilize a great piece of software and operating system to help manage that. And to the extent where it continues to be used in a follow-on opportunity, like in Israel, opportunity makes it seem like it's a positive thing, but just it is an opportunity for the company to continue to show its prowess in this arena. I think it shows that the United States, I think if time or push ever came to shove, we would be well equipped to be able to handle and probably be ahead of anybody from a decision making perspective than they would be as our adversaries. So, in terms of war, I don't want to see it, but it makes me feel more secure, and I can sleep better at night knowing that Palantir is assisting the United States government.
Arnie, go ahead.
I loved seeing this recognition, but what I loved even more was this specific sentence in the article. More than half of dozen Ukrainian agencies, including the ministries of defense, economy, and education, are using the company's product. So it is not only Palantir on the battlefield, but we already have some evidence that there is a major shift into Ukraine in terms of what will come next once the war is ended. Is Palantir truly supporting potentially all the entire agencies? So it's like what Palantir needed 20 years to achieve in the US government to essentially penetrate all government agencies. Now with Ukraine, unfortunately, what's happening there in terms of war, the process of Palantir getting into the entire country and potentially become the engine that makes Ukraine a tech hub fully integrated on Palantir becomes a real thing. So now maybe we don't really see the effects on this in terms of financial numbers, but if you think how big a single country could become in terms of contribution, let's say in 5 years from now, let's say the war ends and you have a BlackRock money flowing into Ukraine to support the reconstruction. This reconstruction contract for Palantir could be really big. And this also creates a very powerful feedback loop in terms of recognition from the world that you do need software to run your operations on the battlefield, and maybe also for the entire government. So that can have a lot of ripple effects in terms of recognition, accepting that you need to move your ass on AI, especially in the European countries, which yes, they are trying, but apart from the UK, which seems to be faster, all the other countries like Italy, Spain are just approaching, and they're very slow. And this also helps what Palantir tries to do in the DoD side, because Sham shared this picture. Like this is the total budgets of the DoD. But we see that from this huge pile of 650 billion of procurement, research, blah, 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 essentially everything goes in everything but software. Software only gets 5 billion out of these 650 billion. So it's like less than 1%. And what's funny is that if there is one thing for which America really excels and is not pineapple pizza, is software. So it's kind of hilarious that you have your biggest advantage in software, and the most sophisticated use cases where you truly need the software to show your dominance is the sector where you spend less. And this helps Palantir, like what we have been seeing with Ukraine, really pushes the narrative. Like you have evidence that you need software, and this can have a very strong effects also for Palantir, because if Palantir can push the lobbying efforts to stimulate the government to increase this tiny percentage from 1% to 5% to even 10%, as Carp says, there you have like the TAM from Palantir completely expanding. And this is what Emir shared in his article, saying that even the government side that seems a sleeping giant, with this condition unlocked, can become a truly strong growth engine.
Yeah, I would agree. It's getting really, really exciting to see what's going to happen. I mean, we've been talking about this for a very long time, and we've got a lot of narratives playing out. DoD, I mean, that picture that Sham shared, there's barely any spend on software. That's hopefully going to go up. If it does go up, some of that money is going to go to Palantir. You got general AI awareness. I think a lot of institutions FOMO'd this week. We knew Cathie Wood bought 2 million shares, and they put something out on the website basically saying that Palantir showed reaccelerated growth and blah, blah, blah. And so their thesis seems to be intact. I would imagine when you have almost 1 billion shares traded in the past couple of days, that it's not just retail, that there are institutions that finally got the green light from their clients to buy the stock. And the question now just becomes, which will be the final question we ended off on, is did they buy too high? Or, did they buy into the FOMO and there's going to be a ton of sellers, or did they get a good price before it goes to 30? So I guess that's the last question. Anyone can take it. Where do you see the stock going over the next few weeks, as February historically has been one of the worst months for tech stocks?
Well, I think maybe what's happening here is that, something that very similarly happened with Tesla back in December of 2020, where people are kind of front ending and thinking that they might have to include these in their ETFs. And so you might have institutional buyers buying ahead of a potential announcement that might be happening in March for S&P 500 inclusion. And before I hand it back to the rest of the room, I just wanted to note, I mean, it's pretty evident that this is an opportunity that might not go by the wayside and will continue to persist going into 25 and 26. I mean, just shouting off some numbers we've already kind of looked at in Steven's article, but customer count is up over 270% since 2019. Government revenues are up 247% since 2019. Revenue growth is up over 200%. Commercial revenue is up 150%. Total customer revenue, top 20 customer revenue up from 495 million to 1.1 billion and has decreased from 67% of revenue to 50% of revenue. So these are just good numbers all around that are pushing it in the right direction. And I think ahead of a March exclamation that this is likely to join the S&P 500, I think institutions are finally just getting the go ahead.
Vince, where do you think the stock plays out over the next few weeks?
I mean, I think the most likely scenario is a slight pullback or going sideways from here. But based on the sheer volume, it wasn't retail buying. And I also think it was a lot of institutions buying, and they were not buying to because, you know, when you're buying that amount of volume, you can't, you know, get out of the stock without pushing the price down. So it's those people who bought now, they're likely going to stay in for quite some time because, you know, the AI is a secular trend and all the good things that we talked about. And I think that they did take out a lot of sellers because, you know, when the institutions buy up so many millions of shares and they're not selling them, they're sitting on them, it means that somehow like the float becomes less, and then it takes like a smaller amount of buyers to move the stock up. Nothing goes straight up, so we do need to rest a little bit. I think that's the most likely scenario, but who knows where we go from there.
Steve, your thoughts on where the stock goes?
Oh man, I am hoping to get something done. Does anybody actually memorize their credit card number? This would have made this process so much faster for me. I'm actually buying the share right now, and I'm back here. Let somebody else. This is pretty funny what I'm doing.
Well, the real question is, before you hand it to somebody else, how are we actually going to see it in the background? Because you have a fake brick background.
That's true. That's true.
Well, that's a problem because until Amit changes his background, I am going to keep this up. But we'll figure something out.
Mine's are real bricks, dude. Okay, Arnie, where do you think the stock goes over the next few weeks?
Well, as we mentioned, the story of Palantir went from degenerate retailers to
non-degenerate.
Exactly. So to smart retailers outbeating Wall Street at its own game. But now the story is institutional investors need to have this. As we mentioned in your perpetual stream of 9 hours, there is a very weird combination right now where weak retail investors essentially sold Palantir after 6 months of the stock not going up. I received many comments actually in the past months of, oh, but why Palantir doesn't go up? And I say, oh, come on, like calm down. Like until like if the business goes well, it is only a matter of time before the stock catches up. But that impatience actually made many people sell, especially when it dropped in the 16, 15, because there, like many people lost hope of seeing a major rebound. On the other hand, so who's left? Like the big question is who's left in the stock? Essentially, there are people like us. The weak retailers have already left. And then you have institutional investors, most of which are just discovering Palantir right now. So there is an insane amount of demand. But even institutional investors who bought earlier, why should they sell now? Now there is the confirmation that the thesis works and all institutional investors in some sort need to show AI in their portfolio. So as years ago, there was this mania for ESG and then evolved into you need to have some EV, some green in your portfolio. Now, all portfolio managers need to show how they implement AI in terms of portfolio allocation. And guess what? There are no many AI stocks, especially in the software side. I mean, the best you can have if you exclude Palantir, what's that? C3 AI, which is a trash. You have a Snowflake, which is a Snowflake. You have ServiceNow, which is a great company, but is not really AI. It's more a B2B a great B2B software company that helps companies doing something with AI, but that is not what I would truly call AI. So it's like you have retail investors like us that are not really willing to sell. There are institutional investors who, if they were already in, probably they are smart enough to realize, okay, this is the beginning of the real story. And then you have institutional investors that are just discovering the company and need to buy in. So this creates an immense pressure on the buy side. And until the multiples don't get stupid, I think there is a lot of upside now, considering both the how it's called the water increasing and a specific attention on Palantir. So if I have to speculate what's going on, I would say the higher end of what can happen, given the current state, is the Dynev's stock price, target price of around 30. I think that is the range of the most optimal path, optimistic path. On the downside, we have to recognize that even the most bearish analyst, so, well, Rishi is here. He hasn't changed his opinion. Palantir is worth $5. Ciao, Rishi. But the City guy and the Jefferies guys, who had their price target at around 10, 12, they had to recognize that they made an awful job and they doubled in a week before. Like the week before, they reiterated the sell rating. The week after, they realized, okay, we are dumb. We doubled the price because now we have evidence that Palantir actually rocks. But this, if you think of not only the specific information, but what this information tells you that even analysts that were very bearish until last week, they didn't understand the company. Now they need to accept that the floor is around 20, 22. So imagine these are analysts that 1 week ago didn't understand the company. So they don't really understand all the potential ripple effects from the DoD, the fact that Palantir can truly become an operating system for entire sectors. This is something that they never realize that is there. So that's why I'm like, even if in a normal condition, I would say after a 50% in a couple of days, I would be scared shit. I would sell a big chunk. At this point in time, I would say, no way. Like, if you really want to have my shares, you have to give me a crazy price. This is a rich price. Give me a crazy price, or you'll not have any additional share from me.
Well, Arnie just said crazy price. I just purchased the most expensive per share to date.
$71.
So I just made the purchase and I had it framed and I had it engraved. Amit, are you ready for what I just had engraved on this?
What did you get engraved on this?
Just take one guess and then I'm going to read exactly what I had engraved.
There's so many things. Bombastic.
I had engraved, obviously, our performance in U.S. commercial is extraordinary. Some would say bombastic.
Wow.
I had that engraved underneath the share because you can do 3 lines with, I spaced it out with the amount of characters. After shipping and everything, I've officially paid the most for a share of Palantir.
Dude, you know what? This gives me an idea. I think every quarter from here on out, I'm going to do the same. And we're just gonna, like for the next 5 years, we'll have like 20 shares with Carp's quotes, like just like dope Carp quotes. That's actually a good idea. It's fun. Nice. Kind of fun. It's kind of fun.
It's going to look so cool. Oh my God, I cannot wait.
It's going to look dope. All right. This was fun. Obviously a hell of a week. We'll see what happens over the next months. But yeah, I think we won, dude. I think retail won. I think it legitimized this podcast, legitimized all of our efforts. It was funny, you know, there was this YouTuber who, when Palantir was 6 or 8, he was just making hate video after hate video after hate video about Palantir. At one point, he started like legitimately harassing me. I mean, I remember him coming into my Discord and just like it's just like violent harassment. The other day, he published an apology video, like a sincere apology around what he was doing to the Palantir community when it was $6. So when you got people like that actually just saying, "Look, we gave up, we made fun of you guys, but it wasn't GameStop, it wasn't AMC. You guys actually had a real company." I guess it goes to show you that we won. And there's a long way to go, but so far it seems like we did okay. All right, that's it for us. Self-pleasuring. Yeah, that's the quote. We got to use that quote. That's a good quote for these shares. That's a good quote.
This certificate is self-pleasuring.
Self-pleasuring. I love it. Thank you, everybody. Have a good weekend. We'll see you next Friday on Palantir Weekly. Bye, everybody. Have a good one.
Ciao.